She hit my 7-year-old daughter right in front of me, and in that moment, I swore Karen would regret ever laying a hand on her. You won't believe how I made sure she never smiled again, but trust me, you're going to want to hear every second of this. So before I began, please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon. The scream was sharp and small, and it cut through the quiet street like glass breaking, and for a moment, I could not even move. I just knew it was my daughter, and I ran before the thought had fully formed in my head, my heart pounding so fast. I felt it might burst, and when I reached the sidewalk, I saw her curled against the curb, holding her arm, her cheeks wet, and read her tiny lips trembling, and above her stood Karen. Karen with her perfect lawn, and her sunglasses perched high on her head like a crown, and her mouth curled into that smirk I had come to know so well, the one that always seemed to say she owned this neighborhood. She pointed at the chalk drawings my daughter had made swirls of pink and yellow sunshine and rainbows across the concrete, and she said in a voice sharp enough to slice steel, "I told you to keep your brat off community property." I froze, and heat rushing into my face as my daughter whimpered and clutched her elbow, her body shaken with shock. I scooped her into my arms and demanded, "Did you just hit my child?" My voice cracked with rage and disbelief, but Karen only adjusted her sunglasses and shrugged like she was swatting a fly off her porch. She was defacing property, she said, calm, cold, dismissive. And I barely touched her. Maybe if you actually parented, she would not be in everyone's way. The world blurred red. I could smell the chalk dust crushed under my knees and the faint perfume. Karen always drenched herself in something chemical and sweet that made my stomach turn. My daughter buried her face in my shoulder, her breath hitching between sobs, and I wanted to scream, but the words felt lodged like stones in my throat. I finally managed, "You assaulted a 7-year-old. But she only laughed short and cruel, the kind of laugh that dared me to try something and promised she would win whatever came next. Neighbors had started peeking out from porches and windows, eyes darting from me to her. But no one moved, no one spoke, and Karen thrived in that silence. She looked around as if collecting their approval. With every glare she tossed my way and said, "This is a community with standards, and maybe you just do not belong here." My daughter whimpered again, her voice small and cracked, "Mommy, my arm hurts." And that broke whatever thin thread of restraint I had left. I shouted that I would be calling the police, but Karen leaned close just enough for only me to hear and whispered, "Go ahead, no one will believe you." She felt everyone knows kids exaggerate. Her grin widened, as if this were some game she had already won. I carried my daughter inside, cradling her like fragile glass, every step echoing with fury and helplessness. Her tears stained my shirt, her soft body trembling against me, and I promised her over and over that she would be okay, that nothing like this would ever happen again. But inside, I was shaking too. The doctor later confirmed it was only a bruise, not a break. But the damage was deeper than bone. I saw it in her eyes, the fear that replaced her usual bright spark, and I knew I could not let it stand. That night, as she slept beside me, her little hand gripping mine, even in her dreams, I sat awake, staring into the dark, replaying every second over and over, the arrogance in Karen's face, the laughter where the neighbors just watched, and the whisper that no one would believe me. Maybe she was right, maybe no one would, but as I listened to my daughter's uneven breathing, I felt something harden inside me. I had tried civility with this woman for months, ignoring the passive-aggressive notes about our lawn, the fines for toys left out, the lectures at HOA meetings. I had swallowed my pride for the sake of peace. But peace was gone, shattered in the moment she laid her hand on my child. The image of Karen's smirk burned behind my eyes, and I whispered to the dark, a vow as steady as stone, "You will regret this." Sleep never came, but by dawn the rage had cooled into something sharper, not fire, but steel, and I understood then what had to be done. She thought she was untouchable behind rules and neighbors who feared her, but she had just made a mistake big enough for me to carve open her armor, and I would not stop until the smile she wore so proudly was gone forever. And so it began. The following week, the neighborhood felt colder, the air heavy with silence. Whenever I stepped outside, I could feel eyes on me from behind curtains, but no one said a word. The chalk drawings had been scrubbed from the sidewalk, as if my daughter's laughter had never existed, and every time I passed that spot, I clenched my fists until my nails left marks in my palms. Karen strode about like royalty, her manicured hand waving to those who dared acknowledge her voice carrying across driveways as she reminded everyone about the upcoming HOA meeting. I decided to attend. I wanted her to look me in the eye. While I demanded accountability, the room was crowded with folding chairs, and the faint smell of coffee, the kind of place where decisions about lawns and fences were treated like matters of national security. Kerren sat at the head of the table, her pearls glinting under fluorescent lights, and her posture so straight. It was almost performance. She opened with a smile that dripped false. Warmth, but her eyes found me and hardened into ice. When the floor opened for discussion, I stood, my voice steady though my heart thundered in my chest. I told him about the incident, my daughter's bruise, my outrage. I expected shock. I expected concern. But what I got was silence, broken only by the tapping of Karen's pen against her clipboard. Then she spoke, her tone dripping with mock sympathy. I think we all know children can be dramatic. Accident happen. It is unfair to accuse someone without evidence. She tilted her head and added, perhaps your daughter tripped over her own mess. A murmur rippled through the room, and I saw it then, the way she commanded the crowd with her confidence, bending reality with her words. I tried to push back, but she cut me off. This is an HOA meeting, not a courtroom. And frankly, we should be discussing the repeated violations at your property. Toys left in the yard, trash, cans not stored properly, chalk stains on the sidewalk. She lifted a folder and read off a list of supposed offenses, each one twisting the knife deeper. By the time she finished, the room had shifted not against her, but against me. I left with my stomach twisted in knots, my daughter waiting at home with wide, frightened eyes, asking if everything was okay. I lied and told her it was, but inside I felt the sting of humiliation. I had gone in hoping for justice, but all I got was laughter behind polite smiles. Days later, the first violation notice arrived, taped to my door in bold letters, non-compliant property, a fine of $50. For leaving a bicycle near the driveway. The bicycle was my daughter's, pink frame with tassels on the handles, left leaning for 5 minutes while she went inside for water. The next day, another notice, noise, complaint, excessive disturbance. The sound of her playing hopscotch. Karen was relentless, each slip of paper like a slap across my face. I tried reason. I called the HOA office, spoke to the board members, but they repeated the same rehearsed lines. Rules are rules. We cannot show favoritism. I called the police about the incident, but without video or a witness willing to testify. They shrugged apologetically, saying it was a civil matter and not enough for charges. Karen was right. No one would believe me. She grew bolder, emboldened by my failure. She smirked when we crossed paths on the street, throwing casual barbs. Careful, where your kid plays, we would not want another accident. Or, some people just are not cut out for this neighborhood. The neighbors laughed nervously around her, never at her, but always enough to remind me of my isolation. One evening, I found my daughter staring out the window at the cul-de-sac where the other children played, their parents chatting in small groups, Karen among them with her booming laugh. My daughter whispered, "Why do they not want to play with me anymore?" My throat tightened. I had no answer that would not break her heart. That night I sat in the quiet kitchen staring at the stack of violation notices, the unpaid fines. The smug face of Karen burned into my mind. I realized the truth that logic and fairness had no place here. She thrived on manipulation. She wielded influence like a weapon, and she expected me to crumble under the weight of her rules. But something inside me shifted again, not just anger, not just humiliation. It was clarity. If I kept fighting her on her terms, I would always lose. She owned the rules, she owned the crowd. But every tyrant had a weakness, and every mask could crack if pulled the right way. I closed my daughter's bedroom door gently and whispered to myself, this is not over, not by a long shot. And for the first time since that terrible day, I felt something new, a plan beginning to stir. I began to study her the way a hunter studies prey, not rushing, not striking too soon, but watching, learning every detail that could become a weapon. Karen liked to be seen. She thrived on the adoration of neighbors and the power she held at meetings. She walked her dog at the same time each evening, pausing deliberately where people could admire her perfectly trimmed hedges and white picket fence. She lived for praise, for recognition, for control, and I knew vanity could be more dangerous than arrogance, because vanity begged to be exposed. I started small, recording her voice when she shouted from across the street, catching the venom she laced into every insult. I saved screenshots of the violation notices. She sent the ones that accused us of noise while her parties blasted music past midnight. I documented each contradiction, every moment. She bent the rules she claimed to defend. It was not enough to tell people she was a hypocrite. They needed to see it. They needed to hear it. They needed to feel the cruelty she kept hidden behind pearls and sunglasses. The first time I posted something anonymous in the neighborhood group chat, it was only a question, has anyone else noticed certain rules being applied selectively? The response was cautious, a few emojis, a few vague comments. But a day later, someone else replied with their own story. A fine for a garden hose left out while Karen herself left her sprinklers running all day. Another neighbor chimed in about the late-night barking of her dog despite her constant noise complaint slowly the wall of. Silence began to crack. Karen noticed. She called me one afternoon, her voice sharp and sugary. "I hope you are not behind these ridiculous rumors," she said, "because if you are playing a very dangerous game." I let her words hang in the air, then replied, evenly, "Funny how many people seem to have the same experiences." She hissed something under her breath before slamming the line dead. That night, I almost felt satisfaction, but I reminded myself this was not enough. She could dismiss whispers. She could twist rumors into lies. I needed something undeniable, something that would tear away her mask in front of everyone and leave no room for excuses. One evening, as my daughter drew quietly in her notebook by the window, I saw Karen across the street berating a delivery driver. Her voice rose sharp, and cutting her finger jab in the air, as though she were queen of the world, I grabbed my phone, hit record, and caught the whole scene, the insults, the threats, the way she shoved the package back at him, and called him useless. It was ugly, raw, and perfect proof of who she really was. I saved the clip, but I did not release it. Not yet. Timing mattered, evidence mattered. And I wanted her downfall to be more than a stumble. I wanted it to be a collapse. As the weeks passed, I kept collecting every word, every glare, every contradiction formed a mosaic of truth. I spoke quietly to a few neighbors I trusted, and soon stories poured out, tales of fines, unfair treatment, petty harassment. Some were hesitant to go public, but they agreed to let me keep records. I built a file thicker than the violation folder she once waved in my face. The tension between us grew sharper, like glass ready to shatter. She sensed my silence was not surrender, and her smirk turned wary, though she still tried to flaunt her power at the next meeting. She threatened legal action against whoever was spreading defamation. I sat there, calm hands, folded eyes steady on her, until she faltered for just a second, the faintest crack in her armor. That night, as I tucked my daughter into bed, she asked quietly, "Is Karen going to hurt us again?" I brushed the hair from her face and told her no, because this time we were ready. This time the monster would be unmasked. I sat alone in the kitchen, the folder spread before me, the recordings glowing on my phone. I realized I had everything I needed, not just to defend myself, but to destroy the kingdom she had built. Rule by fear only lasted as long as people believed the ruler was untouchable. I would show them she was not. The plan formed with precision. It would not be enough to expose her privately. She would twist and deny it had to be public, undeniable, irreversible. The next HOA gathering loomed on the calendar, a perfect stage, with every neighbor present, waiting to hear her voice, waiting to be dazzled or intimidated. I imagined their faces as the truth spilled out, the gas, the silence, the dawning realization. I closed the folder and whispered to the dark, "Your reign ends soon." My chest was tight, but steady, not with fear, but anticipation. For the first time since that scream shattered my world, I felt control returning, and I knew that in just a short time the entire neighborhood would see the real Karen, and she would never smile again. The night of the meeting, the air inside the community hall was thick with tension and the hum of whispered conversations. I sat near the back, my folder in hand, my phone fully charged, and ready. Karen walked in late on purpose, the way she always did, heels clicking like a drumbeat, her smile wide, her pearls shining. She greeted the room as if it were her kingdom, and we were her subjects. Her voice carried with confidence as she called the meeting to order, and for a moment I saw the same pattern. Beginning again, her charm, twisting the crowd, her authority, pressing down on anyone who dared speak. She started with business reports and rule reminders, her tone dripping with superiority, but every word only fueled the storm building inside me. I could see neighbors shifting uncomfortably, some weary of her control, yet still under her thumb. I waited my moment, every muscle coiled tight as steel. When the floor opened for community concerns, I rose slowly, and the room fell into silence. My voice did not shake this time. I spoke clear and calm, recounting the day my daughter was struck, the endless fines of threats. I felt Karen's eyes on me sharp as knives, and when she opened her mouth to interrupt, I lifted my phone and pressed play. The hall filled with her own voice, cruel and cutting, berating the delivery driver, calling him worthless, every insult echoing off the walls of the room. Gasped, heads turned, whispers spread, and for the first time Karen looked unsettled. I did not stop. I played the next clip, her voice calling my daughter, a brat, her tone mocking me. I placed violation notices on table one after another, showing how rules bent when they serve her and snapped when they serve no one. But her neighbors exchanged looks, some nodding, some frowning, others whispering in shock. Karen tried to laugh it off, her smile tight. "These are taken out of context," she said, but her voice cracked just slightly and the room smelled blood. Then I revealed the final piece of short video captured from across the street. That night, the chalk still fresh on the sidewalk, my daughter crying as Kerren towered over the shelf. Quick and cruel, undeniable, the silence was so heavy it hurt my ears. My daughter had peeked into the room, her small frame trembling by the doorway, and her wide eyes were proof enough. No editing, no fabrication, just truth. Kerren paled, her hands trembling as she slammed her palm on the table. "This is slander. You cannot use this." But the crowd had already turned. The murmurs grew into voices, neighbors speaking up with their own stories, violations they had feared to mention until now. The delivery driver himself stepped from the back, called by a neighbor who had seen the flyer I posted. He confirmed every word, and the hall erupted. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, whispers rushing between them. One finally spoke, his voice firm. "Kerren, these are serious allegations, and the evidence cannot be ignored until further notice. You are suspended from all HOA duties." Gasps rippled through the room, and Kerren's face twisted into something almost unrecognizable: fury, desperation, disbelief. She shouted, she cursed, she pointed fingers, but the crowd was no longer with her. They were against her. I watched her crumble, her shoulders shaking, as neighbors, once silent, now glared openly. No more smiles, no more applause. The pearls around her neck caught the harsh light, and for the first time they looked less like a crown and more like chains. She stormed out, her heels clattering across the floor, but the sound no longer commanded respect. It sounded hollow. The board promised an investigation. The police arrived soon, after call by one of the neighbors, now emboldened by the evidence. They asked for my statement. They asked to speak to my daughter. And though my hands trembled, I felt the weight lifting. The truth was out, and the power was no longer hers. When I returned home that night, my daughter climbed into my lap, her small arms wrapping around my neck. She asked, "Is it over?" And I told her yes, because in that moment it was she smiled faintly, the first real smile since that awful day, and it broke me in the best way possible. Days later, news spread quickly. Kerren lost her HOA position, her reputation, shattered, legal consequences looming. The same neighbors who once watched in silence now avoid her, some even apologizing to me. The sound of her laughter had vanished from the street, replaced by whispers and pity she could not escape. One evening, as I stood on the porch, my daughter beside me, drawing chalk suns on the pavement, she asked if Kerren would ever bother us again. I looked across the street at the house, with curtains drawn, the once perfect lawn beginning to wilt, and I said, "No, sweetheart, she will not." And when the sun dipped low and the chalk dust glowed on our fingers, I thought about everything she had taken and everything we had reclaimed. She wanted control. She wanted power. She wanted smiles at her command. But in the end, the only thing she earned was silence. And as I watched my daughter's laughter return bright and unbroken, I knew I had kept my vow. Kerren had always wanted to be the center of attention. I just made sure she got it in a way she would never forget.